this is the Fujifilm X100VI, and this is the new Fujifilm X-M5. And naturally, I think a lot of people are going to be thinking about the X-M5 and just wondering what the differences are on the more expensive X100VI. So let's break down some of the key differences between these two cameras. So I'm not going to crunch a whole bunch of specs. We're actually going to be focusing more on features because kind of the main core differences between these two cameras are actually the feature set. But the one very important spec is the sensors. These are entirely different sensors. This is a 26 megapixel sensor and the X100V is actually a 40 megapixel sensor. To be expected, the sensor in this X100VI is higher quality, but the sensor in the XM5 is still absolutely fantastic, I do have to say, and comes in at roughly half the price between these two cameras. I think first things first, it's important to mention that these cameras are actually kind of designed for different people. Just because they're designed though for different people, different areas of the market, doesn't necessarily mean that they can't be used for the same thing. Right, so right off the bat, let's talk about build quality and size, because the XM5, as soon as I got it out of the box, I was astounded by just how small this is. The X100VI is actually a really small, kind of pocketable camera, and it still actually looks tiny in comparison to the X100VI. The other really important thing to mention is, of course, the build quality. The X100VI is robust, sturdy, an all-metal construction. It feels absolutely fantastic. The XM5, again, are roughly half the price. It is understandable that most of the construction is actually plastic. There are metal components, of course, but it does feel noticeably, I would say, cheaper compared to the X100VI, although I wouldn't actually say that cheap is the word I would use to describe it. I think that's absolutely what you would expect to be in line with the build quality for this price range. So when I say the two cameras are targeting different areas of the market, what I kind of mean by that is the X100VI, I would say, is absolutely a photo first camera. It is a camera built for photographers. It's very, very popular with street photographers, pretty much as the main bracket. That's the kind of thing that I tend to shoot with this camera. I bring it traveling. I shoot my YouTube thumbnails with it because it's just so convenient. I'm able to just kind of just have it on my desk all the time, pick it up, ready to shoot, and it's just a fantastic camera for that type of thing. Whereas the XM5 is actually much more geared towards online content creators than it is to just photography purists. It absolutely takes fantastic photos, but there's a number of notable features which we'll talk about a little bit later that are actually geared towards online content creation, videography, that type of thing. So it's actually, I would say, a much more feature-rich camera than the X100VI. One other really key difference, and this is a massive benefit, is that the X100VI is a fixed focal length camera. So it has one lens. You cannot move this. It's a 35mm equivalent in terms of the focal range, whereas the XM5 is an interchangeable lens camera. So this lens, right now, it's got the kit lens on it. Side note, I really do recommend that you do not buy this kit lens because it is extremely cheap. There are thoroughly better options out here. I just did it for ease, but you can see that I can take this lens off and obviously swap that. There's a lot of Fujifilm lens choices for different use cases. If you're into street photography, I'd maybe recommend the 27mm pancake lens for the Fujifilm system. And then with the crop on the XM5, you're getting roughly a 40mm equivalent. It's going to bring it to a similar-ish focal length that you'll find on the X100VI. But of course, that interchangeability of the lenses means that this camera is actually just far more flexible, the X100VI. So it might be a better choice if this is going to be your only camera system. All right, so let's first run through a few key features that the X100VI has that are omitted on the XM5. First of all is in-body image stabilization. The X100VI, this was an upgrade from the X100V, actually has inbuilt image stabilization. It means it's going to be better for taking handheld video, that type of thing. Whereas the XM5 doesn't have in-body image stabilization. It basically is going to rely on digital stabilization or lens stabilization. So definitely certain lenses are going to give you a very fluid look to video, but it doesn't happen with every single lens, so that's something to bear in mind. Next is something called an ND. This camera, the X100VI, actually has an inbuilt ND filter. You can flick it on, flick it off, and it will basically allows you to limit the amount of light coming into the camera. No such thing on the XM5. You'll need to rely on filter threads, ND filters, if you're looking to produce higher quality video than just shooting in auto settings. And then finally, it is Viewfinder. And this is actually probably the most most significant differences between the two cameras, maybe apart from the sensor size or the fact that they have interchangeable lenses. You can see that the difference is on this camera, I can take photos literally just like this, and it's so easy, far more ergonomic, like really, really nice photo experience. On this camera, again, it's a little bit more focused towards content creators, towards videographers. They think you're going to be using the rear screen much more, and there is no viewfinder, so you can't shoot like this. You have to shoot kind of from the hip or using the screen on the back at all times. That is a really significant difference when it comes to photos. Not so much of a difference when it comes to video, but for certain people and certain use cases, that is going to be a real big change. Something though that you do get versus the X100VI is a fully articulating screen. Again, we're seeing that kind of vlog focus on content creation. You get a fully articulating screen, so you're able to film yourself and vlog like this nice and easy. Very bright out, very windy, so an interesting test for the camera. A very, very good use case for the 15mm lens. Even though it's a kit lens, it is still can kind of still come in useful, but I think right off the bat the colors look beautiful. I actually had to mute this here because the sheer wind volume got just a bit too much for the onboard mic to handle, and I didn't want to deafen you guys. The biggest issue for me here is the stabilization. I don't want to judge this quite too much because we are using the kit lens here, and the kit lens stabilization is certainly not going to be as good as some of the more expensive lenses. But I really enjoyed both the colors and the fact that vlogging with the articulating screen is great. Whereas on the X100VI, it is simply a tilting screen, as you can see like that. So you can shoot low from the hip, but you can't shoot and actually reverse this screen round. So that's a really significant change. So the X100VI being a far more photo-centric camera, and essentially, like I said, what I actually use the camera for, let's talk about the photo experience on both cameras, because it is actually far, far better still on the 6. Don't get me wrong, the features that you get are fantastic on the X-M5, and we will talk about those, but the photo experience is significantly nicer on the 6. The manual controls are far better. You have more dials and customization options, so you're able to really find a way to actually shoot most efficiently, most effectively that suits your shooting style. I'll give you a little example. I programmed my X100VI to control all of the manual settings via a dial each, so I pretty much always am in control of my manual settings. On the X-M5, there's a fewer amount of dials, and that allows you less customization options. So I found actually shooting photos with it just a little bit more frustrating than it is using the 6. A real key change is that when you are shooting street photography, the shutter on the X100VI is so silent, whereas a bit more standard kind of loudness on the X-M5. That's not clearly something they were focused on. It does mean that when you're walking around and taking street photos, it's much less obtrusive on the X100VI. It is far more obvious that you're taking a shot on the X-M5, which again, if street is going to be one of the things you enjoy doing with your cameras, that is an important note. Let's talk a little bit more about those dials and controls though, because there are some key differences. The Fujifilm X-M5 has a film simulation dial. This is a pretty polarizing feature. The real key difference is actually taking up real estate on the top of the camera, which again could have been used for a manual dial or manual control. This isn't something I'm a fan of, I have to admit, because I have no problem kind of really playing around, getting into the menus, and I enjoy kind of playing around my film simulations. So I don't need the ease of access, and I would have preferred a manual control. However, for some people, this might be really useful. And the other key difference is that on the main top dial here, you've of course got your kind of standard modes, your manual, auto, shutter priority mode, auto mode, that type of thing. But then they have a vlog mode and a video mode. The vlog mode is actually super useful, and this is where you start seeing a lot of these changes that I was talking about, it being a much more camera focused on content creation. There's a few really cool things that if you are wanting to make things like TikTok videos, you can go into the menu and set up 9x16 videos set to a certain length of time. So the camera actually becomes almost like a replacement for a phone, and I think there's going to be a lot of people buying it for that type of feature. And video as a whole is an area where the X-M5 just absolutely excels. It actually shoots 6.2K open gate video, meaning that the frame size is significantly bigger, meaning that you can actually crop to a portrait view with far more ease than you can on a kind of a standard 16:9 video frame. If you are planning on shooting consistent video with your camera, and that's a really important feature, the X-M5 is actually far better value for your buck than the X100VI. This is like a 90% photo camera, a 10% video camera. This is almost like 50-50, and the video features are punching way above their price point. That 6.2K open gate video is a feature that is actually reserved for far more expensive cameras traditionally. And I think that really kind of sums things up. I think the split between the photo and video focus is a key difference here. If you are looking to produce videos using your camera, or you're looking to make kind of internet videos, that type of thing, this camera is going to be a fantastic fit for you around about that $800 price point. And whereas the X100VI, an incredible photo camera, probably my favorite photo camera I've actually ever owned, but it is just that, a photo camera. It does shoot good video, and I have used it for videos here, like on my YouTube channel, but it's not particularly flexible in its video approach. It just kind of shoots very high quality standard 4K video, but it's fixed at that focal length with a lot less customization.